Welcome everyone. I am here to talk about the Twilight Zone Season 4, Episode 16. It is called On Thursday We Leave for Home. So, spoilers for the episode. This one's got an interesting premise. It's about a colony that has been surviving on a barren planet for 30 years. And it's led by a man named Captain Benteen, played by James Whitmore. And basically there's a ship coming which arrives kind of like about 10 minutes into the episode to say, hey, we're taking you all back to Earth. And they're all ecstatic about that because this place is horrible, it's too hot, there's two suns, which is why it's too hot. They're struggling, there's nothing to do, it's all barren and nothing but rock and sand and desert, and they have to refrigerate the caves that they live in so they don't just burst into flames during the middle of the night and all that stuff. So they're all very excited about that. The first 10 minutes of the episode really sells how miserable they are, how much they're hoping that a ship will appear and take them back to Earth. And because it's been 30 years, a lot of the people here have never been on Earth. Some of the younger people were born here. Even the people who are a bit older, they were quite young when they first came here. The main character who runs the place, he mentions he was 15 when he came to this planet. And so he remembers Earth, but the memories are quite faded because it's been 3 decades. What's interesting is that there's a scripture or whatever on like the ship they arrived in that points out that they came here in 1991. So obviously this is set in the future for when it was made. But what was funny about it is that realizing that they came here in 1991, it means that this 30 years later is actually 2021 or thereabouts. So actually that was kind of interesting that watching this now is that it's kind of worked out that I'm watching not too far away from when this is actually technically set. And also just the idea that I mentioned those young people here who are were children or were born after and have never seen Earth. I realized that given that I'm in my early 30s, I'm actually kind of the same time, I'm kind of similar to the younger characters, or not even the younger characters, but even just the ones who were children when they came there. I thought that was funny, just because I happened to be watching it in 2023. So no, it's a pretty solid episode. I think the concept's good. The main dramatic hook of it is that the main character, Captain Benteen, once the ship arrives, and it arrives at the end of Act 1, and they're all pleased that they're going to get to go home, and that's where the title comes from. We're leaving on Thursday. We've got 3 days to make your arrangements, and we're going to go back to Earth and never return to this stupid place ever again because it's not getting anything prosperous. Very quickly, it becomes Captain Benteen realizing that he's losing his purpose, that he's losing his sense of power, that he's no longer the one they're looking to for answers, because he was the one who was keeping them all going. He was the one who was keeping them all gelled together as a group. He was inspiring them. He was telling them stories of Earth and giving them hope. And now all of a sudden, they're all looking to the captain of the ship, the colonel of the ship, Colonel Sloan. They're looking to him. They're ready to leave this place behind. There's lots of great little things over this part of the episode that show how he's kind of just suddenly become redundant and not important anymore. One good example is that he goes around and gets everyone's weights and how much they're going to bring with them, because the captain said the colonel said he wanted an approximate amount of weight, because they have to sort of obviously budget for that. They're taking 150 people on the ship. And he comes in with this list of names and all the weights. And the colonel says, it doesn't have to be too accurate. We're going to weigh them on our equipment as they're coming onto the ship anyway. And it just makes everything he just did that he thought was important kind of, just not that necessary. His efforts are kind of meaningless now. He's having trouble dealing with that. And what's so funny about all this premise of the episode, which is about this guy who's losing his sense of purpose and becomes a little delusional as the episode goes on, because he thinks they're all going to stay together as a group when they go back to Earth, so he can still be in charge and still be their father figure. At one point, Colonel Sloan, once he notices how Captain Benteen's acting, he even says he says that Benteen sees himself as a god to these people because he's the one who they all look up for guidance, and he's the one that's in charge. And he's losing that. We're taking him away from that, and he's starting to grasp at that feeling of being important. what drove me wild is that as the episode was going on, I started to sort of think about this as a prisoner who's not ready to rejoin the rest of the world, right? It reminded me a lot of stories of prisoners who have been in prison for so long that they don't even want to leave because they become so scared of reintegrating into society and being normal and all the pressures that will come with that. It's not the exact same one-to-one, but it was making me think of that a little bit. And what's nuts is that I realized that the actor in this episode is the same actor who plays the character. Oh god, what was his name? Okay, I can't remember the character's name, but he was the old man with the bird in the Shawshank Redemption, who very much is probably the prime example that I was thinking of when I was, at least, you know, if I'm thinking of a movie or a TV show, that's the example I'll think of when I'm talking about this idea that a prisoner is struggling to like be in society again after coming out. I actually, you know, that realization that was the same actor was kind of nuts because there was some thematic links with those characters. Not, I mean, again, it's not one-to-one, and there's definitely some differences. You know, that character in Shawshank would never felt like he was in charge, but you know, he had a purpose. He was the one who sort of ran the library, so he had his place, things like that. And he really struggled in that movie. And I won't spoil where it goes, but you know, it does have some consequences. And this too, in this episode, has consequences. He gets to a point where he starts arguing more with the colonel from the ship. He doesn't like that the colonel from the ship is making them all hopeful and making them all play a game of baseball. That this is actually bad because it's too hot here. They're all going to suffer because of this. He doesn't like that the crew in the ship have given some of the injured people in his camp like more modern high-tech forms of medicine or rehabilitation. You know, there's a woman or there's a guy who's got like a I don't know if it's a broken arm or just a sprained arm or whatever, but he's got a sling on for a chunk of the episode, and the crew of the ship give him this, you know, high-tech, like effectively armband that'll fix him up quite quickly, and he doesn't need the sling anymore. And again, this is another example of Benteen saying, no, you should still wear the sling because that's the only thing that cures these things. Trust me, I know. I've known this for a long time. So you've also, yeah, that's also made me think of the prison stuff, is the idea that you're cut off from society for so long that technology's moved on and all these other things. And it was actually quite funny when they were asking the ship colonel about Earth and what it's like now. It was kind of interesting because these are all predictions, of course, when they were written at the time. But now that we're actually at this time period, obviously we don't have any colonies that have went to other planets and have been living there for 30 years, so that's not accurate. But he does say, you know, luckily there's been some wars, but luckily there's been no hydrogen wars. And I'm like, okay, that actually that lines up. You know, that's a thing. It was interesting hearing them predict specifically where we'd be around the early 2020s. And just having that knowledge, that was kind of interesting from like a hindsight perspective. I did laugh when the ship showed up though, because the ship, they have definitely used this ship before. It's the classic flying saucer, and I'm sure there was an episode last season where we saw it open, maybe even a couple of times, where we've seen like the stairs come down, and I'm like, they're reusing that same prop or that same. Actually, is this considered a prop? Because it does they interact with it, but it's also so big that it's technically a set. So I'm not sure where it crosses over into terminology, but either way, they're reusing this ship and that staircase. Once they're on the ship and we see a little bit of it, that's different. That's just like it's basically just a room with a desk. But I did laugh a little bit when I saw it. Like, every time there's a spaceship in this show, it seems to be the classic, you know, UFO flying saucer. If anything, more often than not, that's a human being ship in this show than it is an alien ship. But so yeah, I mean, this episode deals with some interesting concepts and ideas. The show is dipped its toes here before, but this is a very direct, clear sort of idea that it's dealing with, which is this man who has this sense of purpose, and now they're reintegrating with the rest of the human race. He's losing that sense of purpose and doesn't want to go. And by the end of the episode is trying to tell them all that they shouldn't go back, because Earth has violence, it has crime, it has hatred, it has jealousy, and we don't have these things here. We've been in this little bubble, and while it's been harsh and it's not been pleasant, we have not had those same conflicts. Which honestly I find it surprising they haven't had any of those things in 30 years. But if they haven't, then it's probably just because there's nothing to, do. There's nothing to desire. It feels like he's ran quite a tight ship, and it doesn't paint it in this light that he's been this awful leader. It paints it as kind of a necessity because conditions are so rough. They have to have this like discipline. They have to do all these things to keep things going. And the opening of the episode definitely shows you like him making some of those decisions and keeping people sort of moving forward and keeping their spirits up as well, not just like saying they have to do the work, but also cheering up the young boy who needs to hear about what Earth is like to give him some hope. Like, he does have this, he's so important to these people, and it's the loss of that that makes him feel so scared of going back to Earth to the point where he doesn't want to. And I actually thought for a bulk of the episode that he was going to try and sabotage the ship and maybe strand them all here, and that his comeuppance would be that, yeah, they'd all stay here with him, but they'd all hate him for it, and maybe even kill him because they took this from them. That doesn't really happen. It's actually probably a lot more interesting that he does kind of try to sabotage the ship, and he grabs a pole and just starts hitting it, which achieves nothing, right? Obviously, if he was left like unattended, he probably would eventually go inside and like do some catastrophic damage. But as it is, it's just this pathetic hitting at the shell of the ship, which isn't going to accomplish anything. And it all just feels a bit sad. And I think that's the thing that the episode captures really well, is that this entire group of people and the crew of the ship, the colonel from the ship, all the people that's been living with them all this time, there's this sadness in this realization that they're watching him struggle, and it's kind of pathetic, and they're all just sort of having to treat him with like kid gloves at a point because they can see that he's having a hard time with this. And it's awkward when they have to make it clear, no, we don't want to all stay together when we go back to Earth. We're not all going to live in some big compound like we did here. We're going to fan out across the country. We're going to go live with relatives that are still alive. We're going to go and do different things. Some of us want to go down where it's sunny. Some of us want to go up to Minnesota for some reason. Some of us want to go wherever else. It does feel like you're having to tell someone like a harsh truth that he's not ready to accept. And you know it's coming because when he's talking to the colonel before that scene, he's saying, oh, I don't even have to ask them that we're all going to stay together. They're children, and I'm the one who, tells them what to do. They have to stick together because they're not ready to like go their own ways. And when he tries to tell them all that Earth is really bad and it's got all these things in it, the colonel says, yeah, you know what? He's right. Everything he just said that Earth has, all that bad stuff, it absolutely has all those things. But when you go back to Earth, you won't be controlled by another person. You won't have a captain to answer to. You'll do what you want. You'll sleep when you want. You'll eat when you want. You'll meet who you want to meet. You'll go the places you want to go. You'll be your own boss. When they take a vote, which part of me was thinking, why even take a vote? Just say that whoever wants to go can go. But they take a vote, and unanimously everyone but the captain puts up their hands saying they want to leave. And it does feel like a sad thing. And even at the end, when the captain's hiding from them as they're about to take off, and they're trying to convince them to come, they're saying, hey, this is it, we're going to leave, and no one's ever going to come back for you. It's a case of someone digging their own grave in a lot of ways. And unsurprisingly, when they've taken off, he does realize he wants to go. It's a really sort of sad thing where he effectively acts out one of their morning meetings, and he acts out telling the little boy, Jojo, I think his name was, that, he acts out telling him about Earth and saying, oh, there's wind and the colours change in the seasons, and he talks about all the leaves and the nature and all the nice things about Earth. As he's saying all this, the engines of the ship can be heard taking off, and he eventually runs outside to look and eventually starts begging for them not to leave him. But at this point, it's too late. He's not learned his lesson. He's not listened to them. He's not taken this into consideration, why he wants to stay here, why he feels so challenged and made irrelevant by this. It's a sort of thing where like a therapist on the crew of the ship to like talk to anyone who's struggling with the idea of leaving might have been a good idea. My critiques of the episode would probably just be that I do feel the stretching of it on this one. I think if this was a 25-minute episode, it would probably be a great episode. I think as a 52-minute episode, it does feel a little bit padded. Like, I think there's a lot of really smart little moments in it that kind of help tell the story, that help show moments where Benteen is feeling like he's being replaced or that he doesn't feel as important. It establishes what life is like in the colony before the ship arrives, and it establishes the arguments that they're going to have about whether they should go or not, which they obviously should, but that debate that comes up from Benteen's kind of like antagonization of it, it does all make sense. I think there's just maybe a little bit too much in between some of those moments. Maybe too many speeches from Benteen to his colony, and maybe just a little bit too much waiting around for the ship to arrive. There's a whole thing where, and I guess it really sells how dark it is, but I didn't even mention yet that early on in the episode, there's a member of the colony who commits suicide. It's not one we ever meet. We just sort of like find the dead body hanging, which is quite dark for this time period. I was not expecting to see that on screen in this episode. And they have like a funeral for her, and this is where maybe kind of the hopelessness starts to really sort of come into a debate. And I guess it does show Benteen's like necessity, is that the people basically start talking about maybe more of them should commit suicide. Some of them are arguing and saying, yeah, all the members of this group that have committed suicide in the past year, maybe they were the smart ones. Like, it's showing you how dark and depressed everything is, and Benteen has to sort of talk them out of it. He uses religion to do it. He talks about, it's not right under God, all that sort of stuff. But he does kind of sway them, and he gets them all sort of chanting along with him that they should be together and stay alive, and that there's a ship coming, right? I think that's the actual phrase he gets them to all chant, that there's a ship on the way. It makes it kind of tragic later on when he tries to get them to chant that they should stay together, and it doesn't work. They a few people say it at first, but then they all just kind of, petter out, and that's it. Like, it's gone. So it does have its value, but it does also mean that there's this whole extended sequence of this funeral, and then there's like a meteor like storm that happens during the funeral that they all have to rush inside for. It's all fine, but like, I feel like you could have like said everything you need to say about this society either by just having the funeral and the conversation there, or having the stuff before there where they're kind of working on the comms and they're working on the refrigeration system to keep everyone cool, and they're feeling, sweaty, and they're hoping that a ship's coming soon. You probably could have like condensed all that down into like half the time, and I don't think you would have lost anything. I don't think you would have lost anything, if I can speak properly. And similarly, once the ship does show up, there's definitely some downtime and kind of like it moving at a slower pace to sort of let it get to the point. But all of the points it does make, and all of the character story that it is telling, I think is really strong, and makes for kind of a bittersweet, sad, tragic episode. Yeah, it's great that everyone else gets to go away and they all get their happy ending, but it's kind of sad that this person put themselves in this position where they're left behind because he was too stubborn, too pig-headed to kind of like stop and consider what his new life could be without this. And again, that's what I'm saying. It's a good psychological episode. It's a good character study episode. And I would recommend it on that basis. But I do think it probably would have benefited from being a 25-minute episode, and that's something that's definitely come up a few times this season, is that some of these stories feel like the more tight, really tightly scripted 25-minute format just keeps them at this great pace. But regardless, it's a pretty solid episode. I think it's one of the better episodes of the season, probably, but probably would have benefited from being condensed and tightened up a little bit. If not down to 25 minutes, then certainly I think you could have shaved a happy 15 minutes off of it without really losing anything, and keeping all of the essential points. And they're all good points, and they're all good moments with the characters telling this story. And obviously as well, also is a nice little piece of why Earth is so great and why society is so great, despite all of our problems and differences. It could be worse. We could all be suffering in a horrible, basically hell somewhere else. So, that's the uplifting part of the episode. But no, not bad. On Thursday We Leave for Home is a solid Twilight Zone episode, so I would recommend it, just with a few little caveats. But I do think the character study stuff is really good. So yeah, let me know what you think of this one in the comments and all that stuff. Oh, and I should mention, yeah, Rod Serling does show up at the end this time and tells us about the next episode, which honestly I didn't really get a whole lot from what he said. We got 2 clips from the episode that seem like it's about traveling on a boat that's called Passage on the Lady Anne, and this young couple are wondering why people keep trying to talk them out of being on the boat, and it just ends on this ominous note where they say, "We've decided you don't have to die," which seems very intriguing. It seems like a very sinister potential episode. I'm curious what it's actually about. It definitely gave me a sense of mystery from this little clip they showed. So we'll see how that is. So that's next time. But let me know what you think of this episode in the comments. Like, subscribe, all the usual things. And of course, you can support all the content over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV, including a new thing I started doing is a monthly review of Columbo, which you can get on Patreon or as a YouTube member. So go and see if you're interested in that. But that is me. So thank you once again. Keep watching TV in the Twilight Zone.